Hello, everyone. I am Walter Hull, and I'm the Executive Director of Urban Souls.
And good afternoon, everyone. I am Michelle Barnes, co-founder, executive director, educator with the Community Artists Collective.
We are here today to talk about the 2023 Artist Award that the BIPOC Arts and Network Fund is having. Applications deadline is February 17th. By February 17th, you would have to log into Submittable and be able to create your account, but everything will close on the 19th. So you would have till that Monday to finish your application. But if you do not have submittables created by the 17th, you will not be eligible to apply for this funding. So this award, we're going to be awarding 25 artists $20,000, and we're inviting artists of all genres who have demonstrated transformative service to and are members of Greater Houston's Black, Indigenous, Latinx, Asian Pacific Islander, Middle Eastern, and or other communities of color. Is there anything you want to add to that?
That's covering a lot. It's $20,000 each of the 25 artists.
Right.
Yes.
And today we are here to really talk about a really important part of the application, which is the advocate statement and the support statement. We really want to be able to hear from people in the community that think you are great in your practice, people who have collaborated with you, people who know your story, and people who can attest to your commitment to the BIPOC community in Houston.
And because they have personally and professionally benefited from the collaboration with you. These are letters from people that you know because of the project, because of their observations, because of their engagement over a period of time up to them. But the letters should be provide information that the readers of the application would not otherwise have to gain insight into your practice.
And there are two important dates about the advocate statement. February 20th, if you are uploading your advocate statement directly to your application, that is the deadline. February 27th, if you are using Submittavle's reference request function, that sends an email to the advocate, and then the advocate directly uploads their statement to the submittable application. Again, these individuals are collaborators, creative partners, mentors, community members, or anyone who can speak to your artistic and creative productions, your service to Houston communities of color, and your ability to be part and contribute to a learning community.
And age is not a factor. So if there are young people with whom you've worked and provided services, and they are interested in being supportive of your work and describing the impact that work has had on them, they're welcome to provide a letter.
Absolutely. So Michelle, you've been an artist, an educator, a mentor to a lot of artists in Houston, including me. And I know you've done these type of statements before. So could you talk about when you're writing an artist statement, not an artist statement, but an advocate statement of support, what does that look like for you, and what are you trying to achieve?
Well, those letters have usually been called letters of recommendation or letters of reference for older teenagers, young adults who are applying for special programs, internships, fellowships, and consideration for other continuing education experiences. And often I don't go into enough depth. I don't know how personal to make the statements, but with this, I think that I would broach being a little bit more personable about the experience, working with the young person or working with the artist in this case, who's provided services that have made such an impact on a sector of our community. I would describe that sector, I would describe the project, and I would expand it beyond the usual page, unless there's a limit.
Yeah. In the past, when I've done a statement like this, I start by jotting down what I think about the person as a person, and then about their art, because I do think being an artist is a reflection of who you are as a human being. So students and professionals that I've mentored, I talk about their contribution to the community. I talk about their collaboration with the organization that I manage. I try to humanize them and really be able to lift up their spark. So when you're looking for an advocate for this, they need to be your biggest cheerleader. They need to be someone that gets excited about your work, someone that, always talking to other people about your work. This is very important. So we're going to go to some questions. This is a process right now that we want you to be able to ask questions and for us to answer it as a team. But we also have other staff members that are with us today that's going to be doing some technical assistance, and we really want to answer your questions in real time. So is there any questions that have come up so far?
I think they're still formulating some questions, but I think some questions in terms of when we talk about impact, what does impact look like in these statements? Does it need to be data? Does it need to be, or can it just be stories?
I think stories are the most important element. The data is fine and is expected in certain circumstances, but this is an opportunity to really get some insight through stories, real experiences, descriptors of how the program, the project, the person has impacted and changed, maybe in terms of service decisions or artistic career decisions. What kind of impact the experiences have had on the individual.
Yeah. And when I think of impact, I'm specifically thinking about the contribution. I think the contribution speaks louder than sometimes the data, but the contribution, what was the collaboration, and most importantly, what was that intent? So you really want to be able to demonstrate how intentional you were in your community when you were doing the work, and whatever organization or mentor or community advocate that you kind of worked with, what was that creative process like? Because this person, you as an applicant, you're going to be joining a learning community. And so we want that advocate statement to demonstrate that you can be part of this learning community as a collaborator.
We have a question about, is it a problem if the advocate writes for more than one applicant?
No.
No.
It might be a problem if we have an advocate that's writing 300 statements. So I think part of the question is that, part of what we've said to other people is be thoughtful around those letters and be thoughtful around how many and who you can actually be a super fan for.
So would that then, should they ask their advocate if they're writing for another?
I think from an advocate standpoint, when people have been asked for an advocate, I think that part of the thing for us is be thoughtful of how many people you can say yes to, instead of saying yes to everybody. Think about who you really can be. This is not a high school deadline. This is not a college deadline application where you have to write 30. This is not an opportunity for you to be excited about about each individual, and we want to hear that excitement. Don't have to do 30. Be thoughtful around that.
There was a question that came to the website, and it was, can my advocate be out of state or out of the city? Absolutely. This is about someone demonstrating your work in a community, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in Houston.
So if somebody has recorded recommendations from past work, can they use this?
Recorded recommendations from past work?
If the applicant has applied based on past work, well, yes. So especially regarding the response from an advocate, how else would an advocate be able to write, to tell a story or add to the story. Yeah, so it could be based on past work, and the future work is reflective of either the continuum of that work and service, learning, or it could be in a different direction.
So we're getting a number of questions in, so we're trying to figure out how, like, I'm trying to prioritize some of these. Do you have any questions? Sorry.
I was wondering if
Can
everybody can hear you,
Oh,
or if we need to repeat.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay.
okay. And Hank, if there are other questions you need to read out, like, I'm trying to, like,
I'm seeing something and I'm addressing one offline, and I sent you a couple by chat.
great. So, what can the applicant do to help their advocate provide a good response for this award? So I think, Walter, you talked a little bit about having a conversation and like, but I think what we have said before is that this is a whole story, your application, and make sure that when you are talking to your advocate, that they understand the story that you're saying and what you're conveying, so that it becomes part and parcel of that conversation and not, and I think that our hope is that people are having a conversation with their advocates, that this is not just a transaction, but it is an ongoing part of the relationship. And it's an opportunity in order to get some new information, or, like, you know, for us as the BIPOC Arts Network and Fund, to actually have some of that data and be able to share in that conversation.
Yeah, I think it also speaks to feedback, right? It's important for the applicants to have an actual conversation about what does the learning community look like, what does collaboration look like, how to define our collaborative effort. And that's going to help the advocate also think a little bit deeper about what they want to put into this statement, because like Sixto said, this is not about being transactional, this is about being intentional. So you really want to have that initial conversation with the advocate to know exactly what's going in there that's actually going to support the things that you're actually putting into your application about your artistic practice and your contribution to the BIPOC community in Houston.
With rare exception, I would think the advocate statement is such a new aspect to an application process. It is to provide insight that the readers wouldn't ordinarily have or otherwise have or gain. The whole process is so new and intriguing and wonderful because it's an opportunity to provide service when there has been so much attention on just the production of work and not connections to community. And that's what this is about. Connection to community. Yeah.
Thank you, Michelle, for that, because I think there's questions around aesthetic work versus community impact. And this particular opportunity is about building a stronger BIPOC arts ecosystem in Houston.
Yes.
And that is and we are looking to, we are looking to celebrate and honor 25 of the artists who have been doing that work historically, and that this is an opportunity for them to highlight that work and that service, and not just think of it as a product on the wall or as a performance. And I guess exactly what you said, the impact and the engagement and the relationship with the community.
Right, it's cooperative. So even among other artists, there can be examples of that kind of cooperation, collaboration, that is altogether different from being competitive within the community.
Connection,
yes,
celebration. That's what I'm hearing. So you really want someone to celebrate your work, and it's an opportunity. This application is about you celebrating yourself and celebrating the work that you've done in the community and celebrating the people that have done this work in the community.
So there's a question about the measurement of artist impact, and part of, and there's a lot of things that we are discussing around that impact. And part of this is making sure that it is responsive and that it is authentic, and also that it is that it's timely and reactive to a moment, or reactive to relevant to the community. So those are some of the questions, and that's why we asked this support statement, is because that is who can actually speak to those things exceptionally, right? That's what we want. And it's not just about the artist and the applicant saying what they do. It's our opportunity to hear from the community as to this is what actually is happening in our lives and in our communities. And that's actually part of why the BIPOC Arts Network and Fund is doing it this way, is that we are trying to give voice to our communities and give opportunities for our communities to be to recognize that they're an essential part of this process and not just the receivers of information. They are why we do this work.
Contribution to community. I don't know if I've ever seen an application that asks that question, and I think that really speaks to what art does, which is lift the community up, and I'm excited about that.
It's definitely what art does in the BIPOC community.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we have. This building, not the building, because this building has changed, but Community Arts Collective speaks to that. And so many of our partners, and so all of us speak to the work that you have been doing with communities, in partnership with communities, as artists responding to what a community, what you felt the community needed, and then also as over the years have changed because the community has changed and the needs and the artist has changed. So I think that that's important to be thinking about that. One of the questions is that in terms of the support can actually be generated by both either a letter or actually a video. And that video can be, we are accepting videos in Spanish. We're expecting written things, written letters in Spanish. If there is any other language other than Spanish that somebody needs to submit in, please just check in at Houston, info@houstonbanf.org to make sure that we have the translation possibilities. Almost positively, we can say yes, but we just want to make sure beforehand that we can actually do this and not have those issues afterwards.
And that's what I love about this application is the part that they can actually put videos, because sometimes people can express themselves verbally, or someone can talk about the work verbally, whereas on paper sometimes maybe it gets lost. So the opportunity to be able to put this advocate statement into a video, I think can be very, very powerful.
Absolutely.
I think we have a question on artists can request different letters. Is it only one letter? No. So Violet, that there's actually 2 letters that are required that in order to have a complete application, you need 2 letters of support. And you can be thoughtful around how those letters of support actually answer different parts of the criteria, because not every advocate or community supporter can actually speak to all of your work.
Right.
Yeah, and an example of that could be if you're an artist that puts on production, but you also work with young people, you might want to have one of your advocate statements be the person that you work with working with those young people, and then individuals that you've worked with on your production or in a community where you held a production. So think about that so it can tell the whole story of your artistic practice.
So one of the questions that come in is that, are we talking about an artist's contribution to the Houston community solely?
No, because the advocate statement can also be work that you've done in another community, but you do have to demonstrate your work that you've been doing in Houston as well. Am I correct on that?
Yes, so there has to be a dedicated component of your work that's here in Houston,
Mm-hmm.
but it does not have to be just in Houston. And so that's the part where, but the awardees, one of the reasons why we're doing this is in order to make sure that we are supporting those and uplifting those who actually have a dedication and a commitment to Houston.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to make sure that you demonstrate that there's a commitment to Houston.
So in that respect, if you use someone outside of the state, you may need to use the other one locally.
Are only 2 statements required?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Just
Yeah.
2?
Just 2.
More than 2 would be
we can't accept.
Okay, unacceptable.
We cannot accept that through the process, and that's the part where we also want to make sure that, like, asking for 2 support statements is a lot already. Is a lot. So we also don't want to, like, we don't need you to do we're trying to manage what is enough, but we're also and trying to figure out what is too much, and it is an interesting balance for us in this component. I think that in terms of you've spoken a bit around what the content is, how you think of it. Actually, can you talk about if you were going to be if somebody was going to approach you, what are some good ways in order to approach you for that process, to be a mentor, to write this letter or to do this video?
Like personally?
Yeah. I would say that to just have a conversation about our work experiences together and which ones we want to highlight, because our work in the community as an organization is in one of 4 areas generally. And in some cases with artists, it's in multiple areas. So we would just need to talk about what we want to emphasize and make sure that those statements and that evidence of success and service and learning shows up in the statements.
Yeah, for me, I would definitely want to know why they are applying for this grant in the first place, because I want to hear them say, "Hey, I deserve this. I deserve this." So therefore we can go through. We can start at celebration. Yes, you deserve this. You are valued. You should apply for this. What do you want to highlight? Right? What was most important in our relationship working together? Like, I want to know from you, what did you get out of this experience? And then that'll help me shape that. So it's not so much a letter of recommendation, it's really a support that I've worked with you and I hope to work with you again, or I'm currently working with you, and I attest to your ability to uplift the community through your work.
I think that's also one of the reasons why we said an advocate support statement instead of a rep.
Right.
We're trying to be really thoughtful around celebration, around uplifting, and an advocate is a whole different person than a job reference.
Yeah, I think it's so important that the language is changing, the words are changing to be more descriptive. So reference is not sufficient. Advocate is much better.
All our artists deserve advocates.
Exactly.
We need them.
And all our artists need to start asking our advocates to speak up for them. So that is actually part of our ongoing aspect. I think, Amir, you're in the room.
I can confirm this this statement that you say that there can be letters and videos.
It's either a letter or a video.
Okay, so it doesn't say video on the what is this?
Applications.
This application, it doesn't say video. So that's why I'm trying to confirm that, because then I would need to know the size, I would need to know the duration.
Okay.
Are you looking at a worksheet?
Yeah.
Are you looking at the grant application?
I'm looking at page 8.
I think I'm trying to pull up we'll answer that question in a second when we pull up those details. Amir, do you have a question that we can?
On the worksheet 17 is where the applicants are going to support this.
So most of the questions that I have really have been answered. You mentioned the advocate statement could come from a collaborator. And so when approaching a collaborator with the statement, how detached do you want that collaborator to be from the actual project, as far as, because it's the advocacy statement, them being involved in the project too, does that cause like a conflict of interest?
Well, thanks for the question, Amir, because the biggest thing, this is not a project grant. So you have collaborators, and that's fine. This is actually about celebrating the history of support of communities of color and service to communities of color. So the collaborator can speak to that. but they also need to be able to be clear about what's your work versus what's their work. And so, like, you know, like, I think that that's part of the discussion of like, or you all need to be talking about how all these things come together, but you need to be thoughtful, and that needs to come clear in the statement, and then for a reader who doesn't know you to be able to understand. And I think that's actually one of those things. You don't have to worry about the project. You don't have to worry about what's in the future. This is about talking about what you've done and why it's been really important to you as a collaborator, to you as a community member, and that's an opportunity to be able to speak up on that and celebrate those moments. Does that make sense? So Henry, in order to, like, if you look on the page 18, you can actually see of the worksheet and submittal guide, you can actually upload or give a link to up to 3 minutes of video or an audio.
Page 8.
Yeah, the very last page of the guidelines.
Okay, so it's, yeah, so in other words, you put that information. Okay, so does that go into?
That is that information goes to the advocate.
Okay, I see, okay.
So that's the part where we put that there because that's what the advocate will see versus not necessarily, yes, to be clear around that aspect.
Okay, is there a file size?
It's a
maximum file size?
We'll have to follow up with you around the file size about that aspect.
Because that also brings up the next question. What if your advocate does not have the technical or computer skills that you might have? So
this is also why you get to submit it as well.
okay, so in other words, well, here's the other question. Okay, if their command of English is not as great as yours, so you're asking them to write something.
Or do a video in English or Spanish, or if there's another language that they need to.
So I would have to go to them and video them.
Or they can do it off of their phone, or they can, however, like, you know, I guess some of these aspects are what we're trying to create, like, opportunities for anybody to be able to do. It doesn't have to be a high quality video. It just needs to be that we can actually hear what, like, and understand what is being said, and like, and in that component. So it can be off of the phone. It's an opportunity where if they don't have access to a phone or to do a video, we encourage you to try to figure out to work with them on that aspect, or if there is other places, or connect with us to see if there's other opportunities for us that we can share around some of that technical support. But again, this doesn't have to be a high production value. It really just needs to be, or even if you're actually like doing it, like it can be a voicemail. It can just be around them putting it onto sending them an audio file, sending us an audio file instead of a video, if that's easier. We do understand, like, you know, there are technology, like, you know, technology concerns, and we're trying to be mindful about what can make the most sense. But really, how this shows up is part of the thing where hopefully you as like, you know, as an applicant can actually help them, or find the people who can actually help make this help the support to make it happen. And we're also recognizing this is round 1 out of, like, you know, 2 rounds, and we will continue to acknowledge, like, where our misunderstandings or blind spots are around doing application. We recognize doing applications online is already difficult, but that is part of the thing where we are having to understand how we're also going to do the review part around this. So there are sacrifices and there are choices that we need to make that we recognize, and we're trying to figure out what are the ways that we can adapt or in the future, or what are the ways that we just have to accept that this is where we are right now in terms of our opportunity, and how can we figure out workarounds or support differently for the next round. Okay, let me see if there's other questions. Oh, it's 100 megabyte file is the file size. So again, remind suggested steps. Y'all, like, as soon as you get into that submittable application, like, you need to go through those eligibility questions, and then of the next page and hit save draft in order to make sure that it is there. And this step number 2 is talk to your advocates,
ASAP.
get them on board. And recognize how best to, and have a conversation with them as to how best do they, like, can you help them to provide, to do it by the deadlines? Is it by having this video? Is it for them to use their email so that they have an extra week in order to turn it in until the 27th? We're trying our best in order to make some adaptations and be thoughtful, but we also want to make sure that we can get it to the point where we're able to celebrate our awardees and announce our awardees in May before people run away for the summer. This wants to be something where we get to celebrate it this year and then be able to get going. There's a question in terms of the artist learning community. Like, Walter, you talked a little bit about like what some of the ideas have been around that. Can you just again expand around what we've talked about as our hopes for that, and then I can add a little bit about what that might look like.
So in terms of a learning community, it's really about a group of people coming together to collaborate, to advocate in the community, but also just to be in a relationship with one another and a commitment to being in a relationship with one another.
Being part of a learning community connotes growth through a process over time. So it's not project specific, it's whatever the individuals would like to do together to provide service, to improve the environment culturally, artistically, in the most professional way possible.
Sometimes we do our work in silos as artists, and a lot of times we may feel we're not heard or understood, and the learning community brings like minds, like experiences together to where we can really support one another. It's very important to be supportive in this type of work, especially if you're doing some heavy work in the community. You know, sometimes you need to be around people who get it. So that's what I think about when I think about this learning community. It's just us coming together. There may be something that we end up building together, not necessarily a project, but it could bring awareness about the work that the BIPOC community is doing in Houston, and being able to show the younger people what it looks like to be in a practicing artist in a community with a network that provide resources and understand the art.
I think that the learning community aspect also has to do with people's perceptions of what artists do and the limitations that the general public may put on artists as being producers of objects, rather than engaging through service to the community. BIPOC communities have needs that need to be addressed creatively, and the artistic community is primed to provide service through that creative expression.
What has been doing it?
Has been doing,
And this is an opportunity in order to lift up
to be
how
celebrated and recognized.
like, you don't have to hide that. This is actually part of what it is. And let's be clear, they don't, your artistic, like you as an artist and that service doesn't have to be tied to that outcome or that product. That you as a whole being, as a member of this community, that service is actually part of what we get to celebrate. It's like, you know, and it doesn't have to be, you don't have to talk about all these things as directly related, but because that they are part of what you do and why you feel important and why it is important in order to do that, that's something that we're hoping to be able to hear, to get stories of, so that we can actually share this beyond just the 25 awardees. We're hoping to get a lot of these stories in order to be able to connect it.
Yeah, one other point, to get these stories and to be able to share them so that people in the broader audience of Houston can recognize their own creative impulse and connect with the opportunities in the future.
And technically around what the learning community is going to look like, right now we're asking everybody to have to make a minimum of commitment, or at least to make the commitment to 9 meetings over an 18-month period for 1.5 hours each meeting. And that's what we are starting with. And we will recognize that when we bring people together and when we bring that group together, we'll figure out how best in order that group to be able to operate and what is interesting, and recognizing that there's some of that work will be directly like with our, as part of our learning community. And some of it's because y'all are excited in order to work together and collaborate, and we don't have to necessarily have part of it.
We really get to see what happens when people come together. Another word that I associate with learning community is leadership. Is being able to be leaders in your community that can advocate on behalf of a community that sometimes historically have been overlooked. And that's the whole point of these funds, is just to really bring awareness to that and support to that community.
So we have some technical questions that are about, can we receive feedback on our submission before the close of the application? We will actually open up a help desk, which will be which will allow for applicants to have a 15-minute one-on-one virtual session with one of our consultants, and that will be an opportunity. Otherwise, there is no, that we cannot provide, we do not have the infrastructure to provide feedback on everybody's application. We also hope that you all utilize each other as, as peers, friends, and colleagues. Talk to each other and be able to be supportive of each other in this moment, and utilize those aspects, because this is not there is no magic solution that we're looking for. We're looking to celebrate what's there, and we're going to be learning from what we're going to be doing.
I think a really good, if this application, it's an intentional application. It's not something that you could do the night before and submit. You really have to take some time and think about this. If you are struggling with answering the questions, find a collaborative or even advocate who can help you think through and answer each question. It doesn't have to be one person for every question. You can pick one person for each question, because sometimes we need to bounce out of ideas. Sometimes it's hard for people to talk about themselves.
Yes.
And this work. And this is the type of application that's really about your own celebration. So if you're struggling with being able to really celebrate yourself, then ask your community to do it. Find someone who knows your work and can help you talk through that.
Excellent point.
Well said.
I think that in terms of, let's see, looking for, responses are not, we will not publish any of the responses that we've received without prior consent. So that will be one of the things that we will deal with on, but make sure that your work, when we are interested in the work samples that you all submit, because that might be an opportunity for us to be able to uplift y'all applications through the work samples that you all submit. And those might be an easy way for us to be able to celebrate a whole lot of people and not just, awardees, and recognize that the people and the community consultants who are going to be, and community readers who are seeing your work samples are people who might be able to be looking for other opportunities for you all in the future. So that make sure that, again, this is another way that we are trying to develop resources. It's not just around the direct money, but create a community of care and support through multiple ways of advocates, through community members who have access to other opportunities to be able to read and see some of these applications. Are there other, I think that, in terms of we will also, again, we have tried to be very diligent around the questions that have come up in information sessions and in emails. And please go to support.houstonbanf.org, because there's a whole lot of FAQs and a whole lot of responses to the questions. And I think that also, Walter, you also mentioned about doing research or just asking other people around that work. I think that if you actually look at some of those questions or look at some of the responses, it will be able to guide you as applicants as to remind you of each one of these parts of this work. Mm-hmm. And that story. Great. Any other questions from y'all here?
Pretty comprehensive.
Again, this is about what we are hoping to do is celebrate our community. And we're going to celebrate and honor awardees and do that support. But all of the application process, all of this data, all of this work, we are going to be utilizing it in order to help build a stronger case and advocate for our communities of color and our artists of color here in this city. The part of the thing is that we can then, like, when we have, you know, hundreds, if not thousands of applications, we can then be looking at telling our, like, our collaborators, our funders, like, there is a huge burgeoning, and a community has been doing this work that maybe you all haven't seen. So we're helping to uplift and surface some of that. So I think that we already answered the questions about aesthetic work versus creative community impact. Like, in terms of aesthetic work, your aesthetics are your aesthetics, and part of what we are doing is we are trying to, that is why we have a Black African American specific community panel and a Latinx Hispanic community panel to potentially understand and honor and lift up community specific aesthetics that might not be read in other panels. But it is not necessarily about the aesthetics. That is, the aesthetics is one component. It is really the support and uplifting of our community that becomes a really significant part of this award. And again, in terms of like measure artist impact with this group, like y'all, like, in terms of that, we will have, like, go to support.houstonbanf.org for more of those details, because we have some answers to those questions there. Great. Thanks for all those questions. Hopefully we covered most of them and answered that. And thank you, Walter. Thank you, Michelle, for your thoughtfulness and your response. And
Thank you.
Thank you, Sixto.
I just get something, I'm grateful for this process, which continues to let me learn from you all. Let me see how deeply and thoughtful we have our leaders in our community. And I'm excited about how this award process will be able to highlight and identify even more. And our hope is that we will be able to present 25 artists through this process that, you know, reflect the diversity of Houston in a lot of different ways. And we're being thoughtful around that, but also being clear, like, we want to make sure that this is Houston and people see themselves reflected in that, this component. Any other thoughts that you want to share?
I think this process, this opportunity is so important to how Houston is going to tell its story to the world as the most diverse city in the country. We've got to celebrate our culture, our diverse cultures.
Absolutely.
And find the overlap.
And demonstrate it's here, it has been here, and we will continue to, like, you know, and we deserve not only celebration, but we deserve support.
Yes. And I'll end by saying, be intentional with your application.
Thank you all. I am going to end the webinar now.